Okay, so when last we met, we were talking about what a DNG was, and I think it might have got a little crazy up in there, and that's all right. But I'm going to show you what a sidecar file is, and if you are using a raw file like this, I'm going to double click. When you double click on a CRW, that is an older Canon raw file, it opens up Camera Raw, which is a part of Photoshop. I'm going to reset it. Okay. So this is the image it gave me, and I came in and I'm like, yeah, that looks good. Okay, I'll just up the vibrance so that it's not too dark. And then I'm going to hit done. Now in Bridge, we don't see any XMP file. Dun 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 XMP file. And what that XMP file is or the instructions. It's going to try and open in Dreamweaver, but let's see if we can open it with text edit. Right? Tells you everything that you did to that file. This is that file in Words. So if you went to turn this in, what are the chances you're going to even know this is out here? I'll tell you. Been teaching this for 10 years. The chances are very low, right? People turn this in, and then they're like, no, it's not what I wanted it to look like. Well, this needs to stay with this. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to double click on this, reset it by going into my basic menu in Camera Raw, and I'm going to go to Save Image. Save location. I'm going to save it as, this is an example from Classroom in a Book, the Adobe Classroom in a Book, Chapter 5. I'm going to save it as a digital negative, DNG, baby, and hit save. Down at the bottom, it will contemplate that. I hit done, and then I have right here a file that I can go in and mess with and do whatever I want with, and it will keep that sidecar information together. So a DNG, to open a DNG in Camera Raw, all you got to do is double click on it. You notice to open right up in this interface. So let's look at what this mini program is. We have our option bar up here. A couple of things we're going to use a lot of are the adjustment brush, which is the K tool, maybe the crop or straighten. We have some spot removal, which you guys don't need because you're already awesome at retouching. We'll use Photoshop for that. And then we've got your histogram, which tells you a lot of the story about the image, RGB values if you hover over something, your f-stop or aperture, your shutter speed, your ISO, and then the millimeter of the lens. What this is called is metadata. And metadata keeps teachers kind of in control. So when students turn things in, and I'm like, really, you went to the Grand Canyon? I have a policy that when you photograph for my photography classes, you must make new photographs for that class, right? Because I'm giving you new projects. So when you come in, I'm like, oh my God, you went to the fjords. Really? Because I just saw you Thursday. It's like a 2-day trip. They're like, oh no, I shot these this semester. I can tell you, if I were to open this image in camera, just in Bridge, I can tell you everything about this image. This image, f-stop, shutter speed, when it was shot, when it was modified, the size, the pixel count. I can tell you everything about the camera, including the serial number, things that you have done in Camera Raw. So all of this here replaces that little notebook that you used to carry when you wrote down your shutter speed and your aperture. But also, I think it helps a lot because then you don't have to, if you find something you love, you can find out how you did it by just looking at the metadata. So again, I'm going to double click to open back into Camera Raw. So if I look at this photograph, I'm going to look at the histogram. And the histogram is going to tell me a little bit about this photograph. The very far right are where your white values are. The next chunk is the highlights. This middle chunk here is your exposure slider or your midtones. This next section here is shadows, and the last section is the blacks. So you can see it looks pretty good, but we don't have a lot of whites or highlights. So we're going to work with adjusting our histogram, making it a little more even. First thing we're going to do, and this is what I tell all my students when they're editing, is start in the basic panel and work your way down. You're not going to need all of them, but it's a great way to start. So I don't know about you guys, but this image looks a little, does it look color balanced to you? Does it look too blue, too yellow? Right, this guy looks fake. Let's go to white balance. And because it was shot as a camera raw, you have all of the options that are available in the camera. So I'm going to go to auto. Oh, no, I'm not, sorry, auto. And you'll see it cleaned it up pretty well. You can see the before and after by hitting the letter P for pizza on your keyboard. It cleaned a lot of the blue out of there. I also think there's a little bit of magenta. So I'm going to drag this slider. All right, so look at the before and after. That looks pretty good. All right, where you can tell there are color shifts are in neutral spots, such as this pavement. If you go too far, you're going to be like, yeah, that's a little green. Or if you go too far this way, you'll probably be able to tell it's magenta. But somewhere in the middle, just want to look for a neutral spot. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now, let's go back and talk about what these sliders do. The slider, the exposure slider, adjusts what's in the center of the histogram. If I drag it to the right, lightens the whole picture up. If I drag it to the left, it makes it considerably darker. So what do you think we need to do for this picture? Yeah, we could lighten it just a little bit. Again, before and after. I'm going to lighten it a little over 1/4 of a stop, like 1/3 of a stop, and we'll keep going. I leave the contrast alone here, and I use the second tab over because I like this tonal curve, reminds me of Photoshop, and then I'll experiment with, say, medium contrast. That makes this super dark, but I'm going to leave this as medium contrast, go back to the first panel, and I'm going to grab this shadows, because this shadows is why this is so dark. If I drag the shadows to the right, it opens up all my shadow information. If I drag it to the left, it makes it completely dark. So, and always look what's happening up here. So I think I can probably open that up a little bit and get just a little bit more information in here and in here. I don't want to go too far because then it will kind of make the picture look flat. But again, P, before and after. So what we've done is adjusted the white balance, which is the color of the light. Okay, made it, I think we made it a little warmer and a little less green. I added 1/3 of a stop exposure. I went into my tonal curve, added a little bit of contrast, and then opened up the shadows. So let's see the highlights, which is this part here. We drag the highlights to the right. It is opening up the areas that are not pure white, giving us a little more pop in the sky. If we drag it this way, yeah, it kind of gets an overall gray. I think I'm going to bring that up to about there. Now the white slider is this very, very tip end here of your histogram. So notice if I drag it all the way to the right, or if I drag it all the way to the left. I think that we could add a little bit of white, and that's making our histogram much more level, right? Look, see, before we didn't have any information there. Now we have a much more well-balanced photograph. The black, I'm going to drag the black a little bit to the left, not much, not like this. When you start working in the digital darkroom, you are going to want to make things very contrasty, but I am here to stop you, whatever it takes, okay? All right, so this, the exposure, highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks, these 5 sliders correspond to each of the 5 parts of the histogram, and that is how you can work to get the overall density of the photograph. If you were in a dark room, you would put the paper under, expose the negative, do a test strip where you 5, 10, 15, 20 seconds. And what you're doing here is getting the density, which is the lightness or darkness, and working with the way that the lights and darks are different from each other, which is contrast. Clarity gives things a little punch. You can be too punchy. It's a church. Let's not make it that punchy. A little bit of punch is all right. Vibrance takes the colors that are the least vibrant and gives them a little chapeau. Also makes this look like it's made of candy. So maybe we just take that back. I use this very rarely, and I never use saturation because it just makes things look crazy. Okay? Yeah. The way I edit very conservatively, and I edit as if you were going to print something for a gallery wall, right? So my images that are in the photo show, very lightly edited, right? Well, actually, there's probably a good deal of editing done to them, but it doesn't look like it. That's just the way I'm kind of old-fashioned as far as, working with photographs. We can do some things like make our own Instagram photos and do work with HDR and do some other things. But for standard editing, just for a basic photo, this is the tab you're going to use. I like to go into this tab too, the first and second tab, and I use my histogram to tell me what to do. Now, when I'm done, I do not open image. I do not save image. I hit done. And then in Bridge, I get this little icon that looks like the Death Star. And that little icon says, I have been edited in Bridge. Look at me, I'm special. If you go over here, you'll see this one doesn't have it because we haven't edited it yet. This one has it because it has been edited. All right, any questions on just how to open a DNG into the Camera Raw editor, how to do basic white balance adjustments, and how to do some basic exposure and histogram adjustments? Okay?